The afternoon sun hung low over the small industrial town, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement that led to Cole's auto repair. The air was heavy with the smell of oil gasoline and the faint tang of burning rubber. It was a place Ethan Cole had known all his life, a place where the clang of metal and the hiss of engines had become the soundtrack of his existence. On this particular day, however, the garage was not just filled with the noise of tools and machines. It was filled with anticipation whispers and a strange tension that seemed to hang in the air like static before a storm. Ethan stood in the center of the lot, his hands trembling as he clutched a small velvet box. His work shirt was stained with grease, despite his best efforts to clean it, and his hair was damp with sweat. Yet in his eyes there was a fire of determination, a glimmer of hope that pushed him forward, despite the fear clawing at his chest. Today was the day he would ask the woman he had loved since high school to be his wife. Rachel Miller stood just a few steps away, her long hair catching the light as if it had been kissed by gold. She was dressed elegantly, far too elegantly for a visit to a mechanic's shop. A tailored blouse hugged her figure, a skirt skimmed just above her knees, and her heels clicked sharply against the ground as she shifted her weight impatiently. There was something distant in her eyes, something that had not been there when they were younger. A small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, co-workers, and curious passers-by had paused to see what was unfolding. Some of the other mechanics leaned on their wrenches, smirking knowingly. A few traders from the market across the street craned their necks eager for spectacle. The air buzzed with expectation. Everyone could sense something dramatic was about to happen. Ethan sank to one knee, his voice shaking as he opened the box to reveal a modest ring. The diamond was tiny, barely catching the sun, but to him it represented years of sacrifice, nights spent laboring at the shop, and dreams of a future built with love rather than wealth. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out. "Rachel Miller, you have been my heart since the day we were teenagers. I have loved you through every struggle, every late night, every prayer for something better. Today I am asking you to be my wife. Marry me, Rachel. Let us build the future we once dreamed about together." For a brief moment there was silence, the kind of silence that presses against the ears and makes the heart pound louder. Then Rachel laughed. It was not the sweet laugh Ethan remembered from summer nights years ago. It was cold, sharp, and cruel. "Marry you, Ethan," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "You will never be more than a poor mechanic. Look at you. Look at this place. Oil stains, broken cars, the stench of sweat, and gasoline. Do you think I belong here? Do you think I would tie my life to this?" The crowd stirred. Some gasped, others chuckled uncomfortably, while a few whispered gleefully, as if enjoying the unfolding humiliation. Ethan felt the heat rush to his face, but he held his ground. "Rachel, please," he said, his voice breaking. "Do not say that. You know how hard I have worked. Everything I earn, I give to you. Every dream I have has your name in it. Please take the ring. It may be small, but it carries all of my heart." Rachel's eyes narrowed, her lips curling with disdain. "Do not embarrass me, Ethan. I have moved on. You should have realized by now that love cannot survive on dirty hands and broken promises." From behind her stepped Daniel Pierce, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a tailored suit that gleamed in the afternoon sun. He looked every inch the successful businessman. A luxury car purred softly at the curb, waiting like a symbol of wealth and status. Daniel placed a possessive hand on Rachel's shoulder, and she leaned into him without hesitation. "This is Daniel," she declared proudly. "He is a man with vision, with power, with the means to give me the life I deserve." "What can you give me?" "Ethan, more grease stains, more empty pockets. I will not waste another day pretending that you are my future." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some shook their heads in pity, others smirked with cruel amusement. Ethan's hand trembled, the ring slipping from his fingers and falling to the dusty ground. Before he could reach for it, Rachel's heel came down hard, crushing the tiny gem into the dirt. The sound of it snapping echoed louder than any wrench strike, louder than the beating of Ethan's broken heart. Gasps filled the air. One trader muttered, "It has ended in tears." Another sneered, "Fool mechanic, blinded by love." Laughter rippled through the group, harsh and unforgiving. Ethan remained on his knees, his chest heaving, as though the world itself had collapsed on top of him. His eyes burned with unshed tears, his lips parted in disbelief. This was not the Rachel he had known. This was not the girl he had sacrificed for the woman he had planned his entire future around. This was a stranger wearing the face of his first love. Rachel turned away without a backward glance, her arm entwined with Daniel's as they walked toward the sleek black car. The engine roared to life, and with a smooth purr, they vanished into the horizon, leaving Ethan behind in a cloud of dust and despair. The crowd slowly dispersed, their whispers lingering in the air like smoke. Some shook their heads, muttering about wasted love. Others chuckled, eager to repeat the story later at dinner tables and bars. The humiliation clung to Ethan like a second skin, impossible to shake off. For a long time he remained there, kneeling in the dirt, staring at the crushed remains of the ring. His hands curled into fists, grease mixing with blood as his nails dug into his palms. He wanted to scream, to chase after her, to beg for one last chance. But no words came, only silence, heavy and suffocating. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with streaks of orange and red, Ethan finally rose to his feet. The world around him felt unfamiliar, colder, harsher. He had given Rachel his youth, his devotion, his very soul. And in return, she had given him nothing but scorn. The laughter of the crowd still echoed in his ears as he turned back to the garage. Inside, the clang of tools continued as if nothing had happened. The smell of oil and smoke wrapped around him, mocking him with its permanence. He looked down at his stained hands and, for the first time in his life, felt truly ashamed of who he was. He had believed that love could withstand poverty, that sacrifice could bridge the gap between dreams and reality. But Rachel's words had shattered that illusion. "You will never be more than a poor mechanic." The sentence carved itself into his mind, searing deeper than any burn, cutting sharper than any blade. It would haunt him in the nights to come, whispering in the darkness, when hope seemed farthest away. Yet in that moment, all Ethan could feel was the weight of rejection, the sting of humiliation, and the hollow ache of a heart torn apart in front of the very people he had called neighbors, friends, and family. The twilight deepened, shadows stretching long across the garage floor. Ethan sat alone, clutching the empty box that once held a promise of forever. His shoulders slumped, his spirit crushed. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent to his pain. Inside, a seed of bitterness began to grow, watered by betrayal and humiliation. It would take years before that seed transformed into something greater. But on this day, in this hour, Ethan Cole was nothing more than a man broken by the cruelty of his first love. Ethan Cole had not always been a man broken by humiliation. Years before the scene at the garage before Rachel Miller walked away with Daniel Pierce, there had been a boy who carried nothing but hope in his heart and calluses on his hands. He grew up in a modest home on the edge of town, a small wooden house with peeling paint and a roof that leaked during storms. His father had died when Ethan was barely 12, leaving his mother to raise him alone with wages earned from cleaning offices at night. Ethan quickly learned that childhood would not be filled with carefree days, but with responsibility. After school, he worked at Cole's Auto Repair, a garage owned by his uncle, sweeping floors, fetching tools, and later learning how to fix engines. It was greasy, grueling work, but Ethan never complained. It was there that he first noticed Rachel. She had been the girl with bright eyes and laughter that lifted the heaviness from his day. They met in high school, both of them seated in the back row of a math class that seemed endless. Rachel came from a family that struggled as much as his. Her father worked odd jobs, and her mother sold handmade crafts at the weekend market. Yet Rachel carried herself with a dignity that made her seem destined for more. She wanted to be a lawyer to escape the cycle of poverty that chained her parents. Ethan admired her ambition, and slowly admiration grew into love. They spent hours after school, walking home together, sharing dreams of the future. Rachel would talk about standing in a courtroom with confidence, defending those without a voice. Ethan would speak of building something of his own, maybe a garage that carried his name, a place where he could take pride in honest labor. He had nothing more than tools and determination, but she listened as if his words were already reality. The bond between them strengthened during their final year of high school. When Rachel received an acceptance letter to a prestigious university in the city, she cried the day she read it because her parents could not afford the tuition. Ethan remembered her sitting on the porch steps, clutching the letter with trembling hands. "I cannot go, Ethan," she whispered. "My parents will never find the money." Ethan had reached for her hands, calloused from the garage, and said with quiet certainty, "Do not give up. I will help you. We will find a way." She had looked at him in disbelief. "You will help me." How Ethan had smiled faintly, hiding his own fear. "I will work. I will save every dollar. If you succeed, then I succeed too." From that day forward, Ethan carried her dream as if it were his own. He worked double shifts at the garage, took on small repair jobs at night, and even skipped meals to save more money. Every week he slipped cash into an envelope and handed it to Rachel. "Here for books, for handouts, for whatever you need." Rachel would throw her arms around him and say thank you through tears. At those moments, Ethan felt like the richest man alive. They promised each other that when she graduated, they would marry. It would not be a life of luxury, but it would be a life built on love. Their relationship during those early years was pure, innocent, and full of whispered plans about a shared future. Ethan refused to cross physical boundaries, telling her gently, "Let us wait until marriage. Let us honor ourselves and God." Rachel agreed, admiring him even more for his restraint. She told friends that Ethan was the most faithful man she knew. At family gatherings, Rachel's parents praised him openly. "You are like a son to us," her father would say, clapping Ethan on the back. Not every girl is lucky enough to find such a devoted young man. Ethan would blush, scratching his head shyly, convinced that he had found the love of his life. But even as Ethan poured himself into supporting Rachel, the seeds of change had begun to take root. University was a world far removed from the streets where Ethan labored with grease under his nails. Rachel found herself surrounded by students who arrived in sleek cars, wore designer clothes, and spoke casually of vacations abroad. In comparison, Ethan's world of second-hand shirts and packed lunches seemed small, almost embarrassing. Yet at first, she did not let it show. She would call him at night, sharing stories about lectures, professors, and the bustle of campus life. Ethan treasured those calls, holding onto his phone, long after the line went silent, staring at her picture, as though it gave him strength. He never questioned her long silences when she was busy. He never doubted her when she said the university had strict rules about visitors. He trusted her completely, too blinded by love to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. During holidays, when Rachel returned home, Ethan would be waiting at the bus stop with a bag of small gifts, a new pair of shoes he had bought from a thrift store, a packet of her favorite cookies, sometimes even a cheap necklace that sparkled faintly in the sunlight. Rachel would smile politely, but there was less excitement in her eyes than before. Still, Ethan convinced himself it was only stress from her studies. He ignored the warning signs, telling himself that love was enough, that loyalty would be rewarded. At night, lying on his narrow bed in the small room he rented above the garage, Ethan whispered prayers of gratitude. "Thank you for Rachel. Thank you for giving me someone worth fighting for." He never once thought that his devotion might one day be thrown back at him with cruelty. For him, love was simple, unwavering, eternal. He did not yet know that for Rachel, love was becoming something conditional, fragile, and measured against the weight of wealth and status. Rachel's transformation became clear by her second year at the university. The girl who once clung to Ethan's promises now spent her evenings at dinners with wealthy classmates and weekends at parties where luxury cars lined the driveways. She called him less and less. When she did call, it was hurried, her voice tight with impatience. "Ethan, please send me something," she would say. "I need money for handouts, and I have not eaten today." Before Ethan could ask how she was coping, the line would go dead. He worked longer hours, scraping together every coin he could manage, convinced she was struggling. But the truth was, Rachel was no longer struggling. She was learning to enjoy the taste of a different life. A life that made Ethan's love look like a chain, pulling her back to the dust and oil she despised. By the time she was in her third year, she had grown embarrassed to admit to anyone that she was still dating a mechanic. If Ethan showed up at campus with his bag of food and second-hand clothes, she made excuses to keep him away. The university introduced strict rules about outside visitors, she claimed. "Just send the money, Ethan. Do not waste your time." He believed her too innocent to suspect deception. Back home, her parents still praised him. "Our son-in-law," they would call him with smiles whenever he arrived with provisions. "God bless you, Ethan. You are the kind of man every father hopes his daughter will marry." Ethan's heart swelled with pride at those words. He believed Rachel's heart was still tied to his, as tightly as his was bound to hers. He had no idea that another man had already entered her life. Daniel Pierce was not just wealthy. He was commanding, confident, and connected to circles that Rachel craved to belong to. He noticed her at a networking event, impressed by her beauty and her ambition. With Daniel came fine restaurants, glittering jewelry, and the intoxicating sense that Rachel was finally rising above the poverty she had despised since childhood. When Ethan called late at night, Daniel's name sometimes flashed on Rachel's phone instead. She ignored Ethan's calls, telling herself she would explain later that there was no harm in exploring possibilities. But slowly her loyalty unraveled thread by thread until nothing remained. Ethan worked through nights to save for her graduation, his heart full of plans. He dreamed of standing beside her as she received her diploma, of placing a ring on her finger to seal the future they had spoken of since they were teenagers. He even set aside part of his earnings into a small fund for their wedding. He arrived at her family's home one evening carrying the ring he had chosen, a simple band with a modest diamond. Rachel met him outside, her eyes distant, her smile brittle. "Ethan, I think it is time we talk," she said. Relief washed over him. He thought she was ready for their engagement. But her words cut deeper than any wound. "Ethan, I cannot continue this with you. You are a good man, but good is not enough. I want more out of life than grease and broken cars. I want security and influence. I want to stand beside someone who can lift me higher." Ethan stared at her in disbelief. "Everything I have done has been for you. Every hour I worked, every meal I skipped, every dollar I saved. I thought we were building together." Rachel shook her head. "No, Ethan, we are not building together. You are building alone and dragging me down with you. Daniel has shown me what I deserve, and I cannot turn back." Her words crashed over him like a tidal wave. His knees buckled, his chest burned with betrayal. Rachel's father called out from the house, asking what was wrong. But Rachel silenced him with a sharp glance. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulling out the ring box with trembling hands. "At least take this," he begged. "Let me prove that my love is real." Rachel took one look at the small diamond and laughed bitterly. "Do you think this compares to what Daniel can give me? A life of travel, luxury, power. Ethan, this is not enough. I am not enough for you," she snapped, and with that final blow she turned away. The sound of her heels echoed against the pavement as she disappeared into the night, leaving Ethan standing alone with the ring heavy in his hand. The betrayal was complete. His first love had chosen wealth over loyalty, leaving him with nothing but broken promises and a hollow chest. That night, as he walked back to the garage, the weight of her rejection pressed on him until even the stars above seemed cruel. The weeks that followed Rachel's rejection dragged Ethan into a darkness he had never known. Each morning he forced himself out of bed, only to find his body heavy and his spirit drained. At the garage, the clang of tools and the smell of oil once gave him comfort, but now they felt like chains locking him into a life of ridicule. Customers whispered when he passed, apprentices smirked, and neighbors shook their heads. They all knew what had happened. The story of the mechanic who sacrificed everything for his first love, only to be abandoned for a rich man, spread through the town like wildfire. Ethan tried to work through the humiliation, but it clung to him like a shadow. At night, he lay on his thin mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, Rachel's words echoing over and over. "You will never be more than a poor mechanic." He replayed the image of her walking away with Daniel, her hand resting possessively on the other man's arm, and each time it felt like another knife twisting deeper into his chest. He stopped eating properly, often surviving on water and bread. His clothes hung loose on his body as weight slipped away. His hands trembled from exhaustion, yet he refused to ask for help. He withdrew from his friends, ignored calls from his mother, and shut himself inside his small rented room above the garage whenever he could. The once lively boy who had dreamed of building a future was replaced by a hollow shell, drowning in despair. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Ethan walked home with his vision blurring from fatigue. He collapsed on the sidewalk, his head striking the concrete as darkness closed in. Passers-by gathered quickly, voices murmuring in alarm. But it was one voice that cut through the haze with clarity. "Call an ambulance now." That voice belonged to Sophia Bennett, a young doctor who happened to be passing by on her way home from a late shift at the hospital. She rushed to his side, checking his pulse, lifting his head gently. His skin was clammy, his breathing shallow, his eyes fluttering weakly. "Stay with me," she urged, her voice steady and commanding. Minutes later, paramedics arrived, and Sophia accompanied Ethan to the emergency room. When he awoke hours later, he found himself in a hospital bed with Sophia seated beside him. Her brown hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, fatigue in her eyes yet determination etched across her face. "You fainted from exhaustion," she explained quietly. "You are malnourished and severely dehydrated. When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" Ethan looked away, ashamed. "A couple of days ago, maybe." She frowned, crossing her arms. "Why would you do that to yourself?" He swallowed hard, the words tumbling out in broken fragments. "I lost everything. The woman I loved chose someone else. Everyone laughs at me. I cannot bear it." Sophia's expression softened. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Listen to me. You are worth more than her betrayal. One person's choice does not define your entire life. You think you are broken, but you are still here, still breathing. That means you can stand up again." Ethan blinked back, tears startled by the firmness in her tone. He had expected pity or judgment, not strength. Sophia returned over the next few days, checking on him even after he was discharged. She found him in his small room above the garage, curtains drawn, air thick with dust. She opened the windows, letting sunlight flood in. "This gloom will kill you faster than heartbreak," she said firmly. "Come outside, breathe, live." Slowly, Ethan began to respond to her presence. They walked together in the evenings, sometimes in silence, sometimes in deep conversation. Sophia shared her own struggles. She had lost her father in a car accident during medical school and carried the scars of abandonment. "I know what it feels like to be left with nothing," she confessed. "But I also know that pain does not have to be the end. It can be the beginning." Ethan listened, feeling for the first time that someone truly understood his emptiness. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. Sophia never treated him like a broken man. She challenged him, reminded him of his worth, and encouraged him to pick up the tools he had abandoned. "You have skill," she told him one afternoon at the garage. "More than that, you have integrity. Do not let her betrayal steal that from you." As the weeks turned into months, Sophia became the light that pierced through Ethan's shadows. Her laughter softened his bitterness. Her belief in him rebuilt his fractured confidence. She was not just a doctor who had saved him on the street that night. She was becoming the reason he believed he could rise again. Sophia's presence in Ethan's life soon became more than medicine and kind words. She brought warmth where there had only been cold silence, and she asked for nothing in return. At first, Ethan kept his distance, wary of letting anyone close after the wound Rachel had left. But Sophia's persistence was gentle rather than forceful. She invited him to walk with her after her hospital shifts, and when he tried to refuse, she reminded him that air and movement were as vital as food. Slowly, he began to join her. They would stroll down quiet streets, their conversations meandering between light-hearted jokes and heavy confessions. Sophia told him about her father, a man who had worked himself to exhaustion before dying suddenly in a car accident. She admitted that she too had once been left adrift, feeling like her foundation had been torn from under her. Ethan listened closely, realizing that her strength was forged through loss, not the absence of it. Their shared scars became a bridge. Ethan began to speak of Rachel, not with bitterness at first, but with sorrow, confessing how much of himself he had poured into her dreams. Sophia never interrupted, never judged. She simply listened, her eyes steady and compassionate. One evening, as they sat on the hood of an abandoned car behind the garage, Ethan sighed heavily. I thought she was my forever. I thought if I gave everything, she would stay. Sophia tilted her head. Sometimes giving everything to the wrong person only leaves you empty. But giving to the right person fills both souls. He looked at her, then really looked, and saw the quiet sincerity in her gaze. For the first time since Rachel's betrayal, his chest loosened as if some of the weight had lifted. Days turned into weeks, and the fragile bond between them grew stronger. Sophia began to stop by the garage with small gestures that reminded Ethan he was not alone. She would bring him coffee during long repairs, teasing that he looked like he had not slept in a week. She patched up his hands when cuts from sharp metal left them bleeding. She encouraged him to eat properly, sometimes dropping off meals she had cooked herself. Ethan started to smile again, small, hesitant smiles that surprised even him. He found himself waiting for her visits, listening for the sound of her footsteps outside the garage. One night, while they watched the sunset bleed across the sky, Sophia spoke softly. You know what I see in you, Ethan Cole. I see a man who was broken, but not destroyed. A man who still has a future if he chooses to take it. Ethan's throat tightened. You make it sound so simple. She shrugged lightly. Life is not simple, but love can be. It is not about money or status. It is about standing by each other when the world falls apart. Her words sank deep into him, echoing louder than any jeer he had heard in the past. For the first time, he felt the stirrings of hope that perhaps his heart was not destined to remain shattered. Their connection deepened as they continued to share their lives. Sophia found solace in Ethan's resilience, in his ability to keep moving despite the weight of betrayal. Ethan found healing in Sophia's compassion, in the way she saw beyond his scars to the man beneath. Their laughter began to replace his silence. Their companionship began to replace his loneliness. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, admiration blossomed into affection. Sophia realized she was drawn not to the idea of fixing him, but to the man himself, his honesty, his humility, his unwavering spirit, despite all that had been taken from him. One evening, as rain drummed softly against the roof of the garage, Ethan confessed quietly, I am afraid of opening my heart again, afraid that if I do, it will be crushed once more. Sophia reached for his hand, her touch steady. Fear means you have something worth protecting, but sometimes the only way to heal is to trust again. Her words lingered between them, fragile and powerful all at once. In that moment, Ethan felt the first true stirrings of love for her, a love built not on illusion, but on shared pain and mutual healing. It was not dramatic or loud, but it was real, and it was enough to remind him that his story was not over. One crisp morning, as autumn painted the town in shades of amber and rust, Ethan found himself standing at the edge of a choice. Weeks of Sophia's encouragement had stirred something inside him that he thought was gone. He was back at the garage, tools in hand, sweat on his brow, but this time he did not feel chained. He felt as though he might have a second chance at life. Sophia arrived carrying 2 coffees, her white coat folded over her arm after a long night at the hospital. She set the cup beside him and smiled. "You look alive again, Ethan." He grinned faintly, wiping his hands on a rag. "Maybe I am, but being alive does not mean I have a future." Sophia studied him quietly. "That is where you are wrong. The world is bigger than this garage. You have the mind and the heart to do more. All you need is an open door." That door appeared sooner than Ethan expected. One evening, as he locked up the garage, a black sedan broke down near the corner of the street. The driver, an older man in his 60s, cursed as smoke poured from under the hood. Ethan rushed over instinctively. "Sir, let me take a look." Within minutes, his skilled hands traced the problem: a burst radiator hose and a slipping belt. He patched it well enough to get the car running again. The man introduced himself as Richard Hale, a prominent figure in the automotive industry, though Ethan did not recognize the name at first. Richard was impressed by Ethan's speed and precision. "You have good instincts, son. Where did you learn to do that?" Ethan hesitated, glancing at Sophia, who had arrived to check on him. "Just years of surviving in this place," he replied. Richard smiled. "Sometimes the best talent grows in the harshest soil." Richard handed him a business card. "Come to my office tomorrow. I want to see what else you can do." Ethan stared at the card long after Richard drove away. His heart pounded with disbelief. Was this the open door Sophia had spoken of? Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder. "Take the chance, Ethan. You deserve it." The next day he walked into Hale Motors, a towering building of glass and steel that made him feel small and out of place. Richard introduced him to a team of engineers and asked him to assist on a project. At first, Ethan felt overwhelmed by the computers, the jargon, the cutting-edge equipment, but then he remembered Sophia's words. "You have the mind and the heart to do more." He threw himself into the work, learning quickly, surprising even seasoned employees. With his creativity, Richard watched him closely, quietly impressed. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan rose from a novice helper to a trusted contributor. During late nights at the lab, Sophia often stopped by with food, her laughter easing his stress. She believed in him so fiercely that he began to believe in himself. One night while they walked home, Sophia stopped suddenly under the glow of a street lamp. "Ethan," she said softly, "I have something I have not told you." He turned to her, puzzled. "What is it?" She hesitated before speaking. "My family is not like yours. My father was a successful businessman before he died. My mother comes from old money. We are wealthy, Ethan. I chose to work in medicine because I wanted to earn my own place in the world. I never told you because I needed you to know that my love for you is not about money." Ethan froze, shock rushing through him. All this time he had believed Sophia was like him, fighting her way from nothing. And now he realized she had chosen to walk beside him, despite having every reason to chase an easier life. "You are wealthy," he whispered, "and you never said anything." Sophia nodded, her gaze steady. "Because I wanted you to see me as me, not as someone with a fortune. I needed you to understand that I care for you, not for what you can or cannot give me." Ethan's chest tightened, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. She had seen him at his lowest, carried him when he could not stand, and still she had chosen him. It was a truth that humbled him and strengthened him at once. Richard Hale's mentorship, combined with Sophia's unwavering belief, gave Ethan the courage to dream bigger. With Richard's guidance, he began sketching ideas for an electric vehicle, something affordable yet innovative. Sophia encouraged him at every step, bringing him meals, reminding him to rest, and celebrating even his smallest achievements. Ethan poured his soul into the project, driven by a determination not to prove Rachel wrong, but to prove himself worthy of the faith Sophia had placed in him. It was the turning point of his life, the moment when the broken mechanic began his journey to become something far greater. Ethan's ideas soon outgrew the walls of Hale Motors. Richard Hale admired his creativity, but recognized that Ethan's vision belonged to something independent, something bold. One evening, Richard pulled him aside and said, "You have the fire of an inventor and the courage of a survivor. It is time you build something that is yours." The thought terrified Ethan, yet excited him in equal measure. He discussed it with Sophia over coffee at a small diner, her hand resting over his as she smiled. "If anyone can do this, it is you. You have already rebuilt yourself from ashes. Now build the future you deserve." Encouraged by her words, Ethan used his savings along with a modest investment from Richard to open a small workshop dedicated to developing electric vehicle prototypes. The beginning was harsh. The first models failed to run properly, parts broke, and funds dwindled quickly. There were nights when Ethan sat on the floor of the workshop, surrounded by scraps of metal, wondering if he had made a mistake. But every time doubt threatened to consume him, Sophia appeared with a warm meal and quiet conviction in her voice. "Progress takes time, Ethan. Remember how far you have come." He leaned on her strength and pushed forward. Slowly, his designs improved. A prototype finally ran smoothly through the streets one morning, drawing stares of curiosity and admiration. Local journalists caught wind of the young mechanic, turned innovator, and published small articles about his work. Investors began to take interest. What started as a tiny dream in a dim garage blossomed into a company. Employees joined engineers, rallied behind his vision, and the once broken man became a leader. Through every milestone, Sophia was by his side. She stayed up late, proofreading proposals, encouraged him before meetings, and reminded him to keep his humanity amidst ambition. Ethan found himself not just building cars, but building a partnership with her, one that was rooted in trust and mutual respect. Years passed, and Ethan's company flourished. His affordable electric vehicles disrupted the market, praised for their efficiency and reliability. Headlines read, "The billionaire mechanic turned visionary." The same town that once mocked him now boasted of their native son, who had risen to global recognition. Yet Ethan never forgot the long nights of hunger, the sting of betrayal, or the hand that lifted him when he was down. Sophia. Their love deepened as success grew. He bought nothing extravagant for himself, preferring instead to invest in his company and community. But for Sophia, he spared no affection. Weekend getaways, quiet dinners under the stars, mornings filled with laughter and coffee, shared before the day's rush. He realized that wealth meant nothing without her presence. She had loved him before the world celebrated his name, and he vowed never to take that for granted. One evening, as he stood on the balcony of his headquarters overlooking the city lights, Ethan whispered to Sophia, "You made this possible." She shook her head with a smile. "No, Ethan, you did. I only reminded you of the man you already were." His heart swelled with gratitude. He had risen from humiliation to triumph, not alone but hand in hand with the woman who had seen him at his weakest and chosen to believe in him anyway. The night of the charity gala was a spectacle unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. Back in the days when he bent under the hoods of broken cars, crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of guests, dressed in tuxedos and gowns, the clinking of glasses blending with soft music from a live orchestra. Reporters lined the red carpet outside, cameras flashing whenever Ethan Cole arrived with Sophia Bennett at his side. He looked sharp in a tailored suit, his presence commanding his name, now recognized across the nation. Sophia wore a simple yet elegant dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm as they entered the ballroom together. Whispers followed them, admiration mixing with awe. Here was the billionaire mechanic turned visionary, and beside him, the woman who had been with him long before fortune arrived. Ethan moved with calm confidence, greeting philanthropists and investors, speaking with clarity about his company's mission to bring sustainable transport to everyone. But beneath the glitter of the evening, fate prepared a cruel yet satisfying twist. Across the room, Rachel Miller stood near the bar, her once glamorous figure cloaked in desperation. Gone were the expensive jewels and the aura of superiority. Daniel Pierce had vanished months earlier, his empire crumbling under debt and scandal, leaving Rachel penniless. She had returned to this city, hoping to find a trace of the life she had once chosen over Ethan. When her eyes fell on him now, radiant and powerful, a pang of regret struck so deep she could barely breathe. Summoning her courage, she walked toward him. Ethan turned, his smile fading into stillness as he recognized her. The crowd seemed to pause, sensing the tension. Rachel's voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. "Ethan, I was wrong. I made a mistake. All those years I thought wealth and status would bring happiness, but I lost everything. Daniel left me with nothing." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I still love you. Please give me another chance." Gasps rippled through those nearby. The air thickened with anticipation. Sophia stood quietly beside Ethan, her posture calm though her heart raced. All eyes turned to him. Ethan studied Rachel, seeing not the woman he once adored, but the stranger who had crushed him beneath her heel. He remembered the ring she had stamped into the dirt, the words that had branded his soul. "You will never be more than a poor mechanic." His voice came steady, clear, and strong enough to silence the room. "The man you rejected no longer exists, and the man I have become already found someone who loved me when I was nothing." He turned slightly toward Sophia, his gaze softening. "She is the only woman I will ever need." The room erupted in applause. Some cheered, others nodded with admiration. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment of vindication. Rachel's face drained of color, her lips trembling, as the weight of humiliation pressed down upon her. She tried to speak, but no words came. Slowly she backed away, swallowed by the crowd that now celebrated Ethan's triumph. Sophia squeezed his hand gently, pride and relief shining in her eyes. Ethan lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it softly before whispering, "Thank you for believing in me." The confrontation had ended not with rage, but with dignity. Rachel's downfall was complete, not because Ethan sought revenge, but because he had risen beyond her scorn and found a love that could not be measured by wealth. The mechanic, once mocked by neighbors, now stood as a billionaire visionary, honored not only for his success, but for his loyalty to the woman who had healed his broken heart. In the weeks after the gala, Ethan and Sophia settled into a rhythm that felt both extraordinary and ordinary, the kind of life that wealth could never purchase, but love could always create. Publicly, they were celebrated as a power couple, photographed at events, written about in magazines, admired for their story of resilience and loyalty. Privately, they cherished quiet moments away from flashing cameras and crowded halls. Ethan found himself cooking dinner for Sophia in their modest kitchen, laughing when he burned the pasta. And she teased that even billionaires could not escape clumsy hands. She found herself watching him work late into the night, sketching designs, her heart swelling not because of his success, but because of his passion. Yet beneath the surface, a shadow lingered. Sophia sometimes wondered if Ethan had truly let go of Rachel. The confrontation at the gala had been clear, his words firm, but scars from a first love cut deep and often bled long after they should have healed. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city, Sophia spoke softly. "Ethan, I know you love me, but sometimes I worry a part of you is still tied to her." He turned to her, surprised by the vulnerability in her voice. "Sophia, I will not lie and say the memories are gone. They are part of me, but they do not hold me anymore. What holds me is you. You are the reason I stand where I do. You are the reason I smile again." He took her hand and placed it over his heart. "This beats because of you." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. She leaned into him and for the first time felt her doubt dissolve completely. Their love deepened after that moment, strengthened by honesty and trust. They traveled together, not to glamorous destinations alone, but to small towns where Ethan spoke to young mechanics, encouraging them to dream bigger. Sophia volunteered at clinics offering medical care to those who could not afford it. Often, Ethan accompanied her, handing out supplies, fixing broken equipment, holding children who clung to him with innocent trust. These shared experiences forged a bond that no betrayal could sever. Ethan discovered that joy came not from luxury cars or large bank accounts, but from the look in Sophia's eyes when he surprised her with flowers, from the sound of her laughter echoing in their home, from the way she rested her head on his shoulder after a long day. Sophia discovered that love did not mean perfection, but presence, not grand gestures alone, but the daily act of choosing each other. They faced disagreements like any couple. Sometimes Ethan grew consumed by work, forgetting meals, ignoring calls. Sophia would scold him gently, reminding him that ambition was worthless if it cost his health. Other times, Sophia carried the weight of her patient's pain home, her shoulders slumping under invisible burdens. Ethan would hold her close, whispering that she was not alone. Their love was tested in these moments and proved resilient. It became clear that what bound them was not circumstance, but commitment. One rainy evening, as thunder rolled across the sky, Ethan stood by the window, watching the storm. He turned to Sophia, who was curled up on the couch with a book, and said, "You know what I used to pray for when I was younger? I prayed for Rachel to stay. I thought she was my destiny. But now I realize destiny is not someone who breaks you. Destiny is the one who helps you rebuild." Sophia set her book aside and crossed the room to him. She wrapped her arms around his waist and whispered, "And I prayed for someone who would see me, not for what I had, but for who I was. And then you came." They held each other as the storm raged outside, safe in the knowledge that they had become each other's answer. Their love story was not the fairy tale Ethan once imagined with Rachel, but something far richer. It was the tale of two people who had been broken and who chose to heal together. The evening of the grand charity gala arrived again 1 year after the night, when Rachel had begged in vain for a second chance. This time the event was even larger, attended by politicians, celebrities, and business leaders. The ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers, music floated from a string quartet, and cameras flashed at every entrance. Ethan Cole stood backstage, adjusting the cuffs of his suit, his heart beating faster than it had during any board meeting or business negotiation. Tonight was not about contracts or speeches. Tonight was about something greater. Sophia Bennett moved gracefully among the guests, greeting donors and doctors who admired her work at the hospital. She had become known not only as the partner of a billionaire, but as a woman who dedicated her wealth and skills to healing others. Ethan watched her from a distance, struck again by the truth that she had believed in him long before the world celebrated his name. He remembered the day she had found him collapsed on the street, the way her voice had pulled him back from the edge of despair. He remembered the meals she had brought, the laughter she had shared, the unwavering faith she had given him when he had nothing. Tonight he would honor that faith. As the master of ceremonies introduced him, Ethan walked onto the stage to a round of applause. He thanked the audience for supporting the cause of expanding healthcare to underserved communities, a project close to Sophia's heart. His voice was steady, but beneath it ran a current of emotion that the audience could feel. He spoke of hardship, of failure, of humiliation, not as shame but as stepping stones. I once knelt in the dirt with a ring crushed beneath a heel. He said, his gaze sweeping the hall. I once believed my worth was defined by what I could give someone who did not value me. But life taught me that true worth is not measured by wealth or status. It is measured by love that stands when the world falls apart. The room was silent, every eye fixed on him. He turned toward Sophia, who stood near the front, her eyes glistening. Then he spoke words that would be remembered long after the gala ended. I once gave my heart to someone who crushed it, but then I met the woman who healed it, who believed in me before the world did. Tonight, before all of you, I choose her forever. He reached into his pocket and drew out a velvet box. Crossing the stage, he descended the steps and walked straight to Sophia. The crowd gasped, cameras flashing wildly as Ethan went down on one knee. His voice shook with emotion, but remained clear. Sophia Bennett, you are my anchor, my light, my partner in every way. Will you marry me and let us spend the rest of our lives building not just dreams but love that lasts? Sophia's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming freely. For a moment she could not speak, overwhelmed by the intensity of the moment. Then she nodded quickly, her voice breaking. Yes, Ethan, yes. The room erupted in applause, cheers echoing off the walls, some guests rising to their feet in ovation. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks, capturing the moment that marked the culmination of Ethan's journey from rejection to redemption. Sophia threw her arms around him, and he slipped the ring onto her finger, a symbol not of wealth, but of devotion. As they kissed, the hall erupted again, the sound a chorus of approval. In the far corner of the ballroom, Rachel Miller stood unnoticed by most. Her face pale, her eyes hollow. She had forced herself to attend, clinging to some faint hope that Ethan's success had not erased the bond they once shared. But watching him kneel before Sophia, hearing his declaration, seeing the love in his eyes, she knew her place in his story was gone forever. Her chance had slipped through her fingers the day she chose wealth over loyalty. and no amount of regret could change it. She turned away, swallowed by the crowd, her figure fading into irrelevance. Ethan did not see her leave. His world was fixed on Sophia, the woman who had been his healer, his partner, his love. As the applause slowly quieted Ethan, and Sophia remained locked in each other's arms, surrounded not by luxury or pride, but by the certainty that they had found in one another what neither betrayal nor success could take away. Later that night, away from the cameras, they sat together in silence on their balcony overlooking the city. Sophia leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you realize what you have done? You just proposed in front of half the world." He chuckled softly, kissing the top of her head. "I did not do it for the world. I did it for you." She smiled, her eyes closing with contentment. Their journey had been long marked by pain and struggle, but it had led them to this moment. And as the city lights twinkled like stars below them, Ethan Cole knew he was no longer defined by the betrayal of his first love. He was defined by the strength to rise, the courage to trust again, and the blessing of finding a woman who chose him not for what he could give, but for who he was. Their future stretched ahead, not perfect, not free of challenges, but real and full of promise. Together they would face it side by side with love as their foundation and hope as their guide.